I think I'm pretty much better now. I felt rough last week, a little bit rougher than perhaps I let on at times. It was the loss of my sense of smell at the beginning on the Saturday of last week that really alerted me to the fact that I probably did have, well, I certainly had something going on. Whether or not it was COVID-19 or not, I may never know. I certainly would need an antibody test as opposed to an antigen test in order to be sure. And it was mildly debilitating. So I had very mild doses. I read up around it a lot. There was lots and lots of evidence from all over the world suggesting that a lot of people will have had it with nothing like the severity of symptoms that many of us had been led to expect. No criticism of anybody intended in that. It's called a novel coronavirus because it's brand spanking new. Nobody knew anything about it a couple of months ago, and the expectation that we'd suddenly know everything about it is clearly absurd. I noticed my chest. I didn't really have a cough as described, but the problem is, every time you cough, for whatever reason, you think it's the harbinger of coronavirus or harbinger of COVID. But I did notice I couldn't fill my lungs as freely and as often as I liked. Sometimes I'd do a full breath and it'd be fine. Another time it'd be like having dry ice in your chest. So you'd get to the top of the in-breath and it would feel like you had dry ice spreading across your chest. And then loss of taste and smell, that came back middle of last week. It was Tuesday or Wednesday. Mostly it was exhaustion. I noticed things happening. I noticed a slight slowness that I'm not used to. I'd begin a sentence and struggle to remember where I was supposed to be ending it. I wouldn't get quite the right words that I was. It's just a sort of what you'd call a fleetness of thought, a speed of thinking. Now that I would chalk up as a sluggishness, and given that by 2:00 most days last week I was fast asleep again, it was the fatigue, the exhaustion, a little bit of muscle pain coupled with a really crushing sense of fatigue and tiredness that mostly typified my experiences last week. Whatever I had, goodness knows whether it was definitely COVID-19, but I certainly was not right. And in fact, if we'd been in different circumstances, I probably would have taken time off work to recuperate. But such as things are at the moment, I could roll out of bed, roll into my little home studio or shed, and then roll back out again. And a couple of days last week where at about 8:30 in the morning, I toyed with the idea of ringing the boss and saying, I might just sit this one out. But then I thought, well, you don't actually need to. There's no real energy or exertion required except getting through that 3-hour adrenaline-fueled broadcast. Why am I telling you all this? Well, partly because I know you care, but mostly because that's, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd be a 2 or a 3. I know there are millions of people who display no symptoms whatsoever or who get the anosmia, the loss of the senses without any other side effects or symptoms. I'm not one of them, so they'd be a 0 to a 1, wouldn't they? So let's say that I'm a 2 to a 3. Then our friend Theo, LBC's political editor, he was an 8 or a 9. I mean, he was really, really, really sick. Taken into hospital. I'll never forget him describing to me the moment where his wife had to essentially carry him down the stairs. And he's a big lad. Well, he's a normal-sized lad, Theo. He'd be a sort of outside centre if you use rugby positioning in order to calibrate your position on a man's side. So that can't have been much fun for anybody. And it seems Boris Johnson is a much closer to that position than to mine. And to that end, I don't get it. This notion that he's sick enough to be taken into hospital but still capable of running the government.